I think there was 167 different platforms. That's basic platforms. There was probably, I don't know, 30 or 40 different database schemas. There was, I don't know how many hundreds of different specific applications, because it's not like everything is Windows and everything. Banking applications have evolved since the 60s over a series, and in fact with Y2K we got a lot of stuff cleaned up. That was the other thing that was going on in the 90s was Y2K, believe me. We spent the banking and financial industry spent $600 billion worldwide. And the reason Y2K didn't, don't let anybody fool you, the reason Y2K didn't result in massive meltdown then, which we were just all sitting there going, please, please hold together, okay? But still, even after all the fixes and patches and everything that was put in the software, at the core, there are systems that exist in these banks that in their core are still COBOL programs. They still are. They are Fortran. They are COBOL, which for those that are not software people here, that's 40-year-old technology in software. In many cases, they have 30-year-old hardware. Until we upgraded the net, we started this upgrade for Citigroup. They had 25 and 30-year-old hardware technology sitting out there that we were trying to operate off of. Literally discrete 16 and 32-bit machines, mini computers from DEC and all kinds of different. I mean, it's just garbage that you have to deal with in trying to migrate these networks. Now, think of what happens when you have a Lehman Brothers collapse in that kind of an environment, when you have a Bear Stearns, when you have a Citigroup that finally has to fold up and close its doors, or an AIG. AIG, that was one of my favorites. Okay? I've been trying to get a hold of the senior systems engineer that worked for me on AIG. Because I wanted to ask him, I said, how are you feeling right now? And because you know what? Because there wasn't a time when Neil Cherry came back, it's Bell Labs, he's a wonderful Bell Labs engineer. He'd come back, and this guy was almost impossible to kill his enthusiasm and his optimism. AIG in 2 years almost managed to turn him into an absolute slug. Because these people were totally, completely, 100% assholes. Excuse me, that's what they are. And I feel no remorse whatsoever. I hated every moment I spent on that contract, because dealing with those people from Greenberg on down was just unbelievably nasty. And these people,
let it out.
These people, they are not capitalists. This is the one thing I try and clear up with every group that I ever speak to. These people are not capitalists. They are corporatist, fascist pigs. Okay, that are doing one thing and one thing alone. They rent seek off of you and me and everybody in the system. Rent seeking is where you have all these corporations and all these people that go to lawmakers, legislators, and try to tip the game in their favor. Right? That's rent seeking. Right? Again, I want you to pass legislation, and they spend, and you know all these banks, you got the figures, they spend $50 million a year or whatever it is in financial institutions trying to tip the game in their favor with legislators. We don't live in a free market system, not only because of the money, the monetary system anymore. We don't live in a free market system because of decades of rent seeking and all the legislation that is tipped in favor of all the corporations and tipped against you and me, and in the legal system, there's no justice. There will be no justice at the end of this, I guarantee you. When everything comes apart, it comes raining down around our heads. And there's hundreds of trillions of dollars in these things that are. That was the day it all came when I sat in a meeting at Marsh McLennan with Nancy Ewan, Ringo, and I listened because she was the lead engineer. I was just there to listen, and I sat there, and after 4 hours of these presentations, and we had a room full of whiteboards that went around like this. And the job was they had their 4 chief scientists there that were there to explain to us how this trading platform was to work, because once they had the trading platform set up and the applications running, we had to figure out how to build a network that was engineered properly to be able to interface with that trading platform to give them the service that they needed to complete their transactions for the derivative trading. So in order to do that, they had to tell us a lot about, not have to tell us everything, but they had to tell us a lot about how that trading platform needed to perform and what innies and outies and data it needed to see so that we could engineer a network for it. Well, after 3 or 4 hours of listening in the afternoon, and all I wanted to do is head over to Moran's and drink. That's right across the street behind the World Financial Center there. It's a great place to be on a Friday if the market's been good. It's the Yacht Harbor where Ivana keeps across from the Trade Center on the Hudson where Ivana keeps her yacht, Ivana Trump. But anyway, after 3.5, 4, I don't know, they had this, with mathematics and block diagrams and all this stuff, right? And of course all our engineers, and they're furiously scribbling notes and trying to figure out, what all this means. But the basic thing came down to, I stopped and I said, you know what? Could you tell me, he said, I went up to the board, I started, are we done with this? Yes, okay. So I started erasing everything, right? And then you could see them, they were still cringing because, they hadn't documented a lot of this. They were just a lot of this, the whiteboard was the first place they ever written it down. And I said, I drew up 5 blocks. And I said, what I want you to do is, I said, I want you to tell me in 5 decision blocks, right? How do I assess the risk, right? How do I go through these 5 decision blocks? Tell me how I know what side of this transaction that I'm on and what it means, 5 blocks, okay? So one of the senior scientists goes up there and he starts writing inside the box where I'd written down, how do I assess the risk? How do I determine who's on the other side of the party? Blah 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 blah. Right? What is the return? What's the yield? How do I exit this thing? Okay. And after another 45 minutes, there was 3 more whiteboards filled up because they couldn't explain it. Can't explain this stuff. By the time you look at them in detail, they finally got it functional and it worked, and they sold a hell of a lot of them. But by golly, you can't understand them. They don't understand them, actually. And as soon as I saw that, I said, you know what? It's time to leave. I got to get out of New York. That was in 2000. Got to get out of New York because this is all going to blow up in a big way. It was going to be the towers first, but that's when this all started. Okay. But just a little digression, slight digression. When the Trade Center went down, a lot of people don't know this. They got the markets back up in a week, right? You know how they got the markets back up? Since all of this main switching for the fiber fabric and everything that existed in Lower Manhattan went through the Trade Center, when the sub-basements caved in and had millions and millions of tons of rubble on top of them, it severed probably 90% of all of the fiber and main switching in Lower Manhattan for NASDAQ, NYMEX, the New York exchanges, Merrill Lynch, which trades 18% on their network right up the street at the West Side Data Center. 1 out of every 5 stocks on the stock exchange, all their stuff went out of there. So literally they were blacked out. What they did was, when I went for Nancy's memorial service 3 weeks later, all of Lower Manhattan was spiderwebbed with fiber cables running around the Trade Center complex to get from the NYMEX to the NASDAQ to the banking to the Fed, because the Fed's right down in Battery Park. All of us, every 50 feet there was a New York City cop station. They were all covered with plywood. This was both fiber and power. We're running all across the sidewalks and honeycombed all through Lower Manhattan. The Band-Aid bubble gum, believe me, in a week what was done was stupendous. Absolutely stupendous, the fact that they even got functional again in a week. But if people knew, that remained that way for 7 months, right? The entire bulk of the U.S. financial system ran on that Band-Aid and bubble gum for about 7 months that way, with those cables stretched all over Lower Manhattan before they finally started getting some of the facilities relocated in other basements around downtown. So, but if you look at like I said, going back to the main part of the discussion, if you look at any one of these entities right now, including in the Fed itself, which is doing this on the fly and understaffed, you think about what jobs that they're taking on between the Fed and the Treasury right now, where they're taking on entire banks and banking systems and financial entities is that they don't understand anything about. These are not financial people. And particularly, they have no subject matter expertise in these